The assassin's arrival, Captain Vex of the Galactic. Council's elite strike. Force stepped off his stealth ship onto the barren surface of colony world TX-7. His mission was simple: eliminate Dr. Marcus Webb, the human scientist who had discovered something that threatened the entire galactic order. The Council had ruled the galaxy for 3,000 years. They maintained peace through careful control of technology and resources. No species was allowed to advance beyond their assigned level. Humans, being relatively new to the galactic community, were classified as a Level 3 civilization allowed basic space travel and simple energy weapons. But nothing more. Dr. Webb had broken that rule. Intelligence reports showed that the human had created something in his isolated research facility on this dead world. The Council's sensors detected energy signatures that shouldn't exist. Whatever Webb had built, it was beyond Level 3 technology. Far beyond. Vex checked his weapons. His plasma rifle could vaporize a human in seconds. His armor made him nearly invincible against primitive human weapons. This should be quick. The research station sat in a valley between two rocky hills. It looked ordinary, just a collection of white domes connected by covered walkways. But Vex's scanners showed massive energy readings coming from underground. As he approached, he noticed something strange. The ground around the facility was different. Where everything else on this world was gray rock and dust, here there were patches of green. Actual plant life. Impossible on a dead world like this. Vex pushed the thought aside. His mission was clear. He entered the facility through the main airlock. The corridors were empty, but he could hear sounds coming from deeper inside. Machinery humming, and something else voices. Multiple voices. Following his scanner, Vex descended into the underground levels. The energy readings grew stronger. With each step, whatever Webb had built, it was massive. The corridor opened into a vast chamber. Vex stopped, his breath catching in his throat. The room was filled with life. Massive tanks lined the walls, each one containing what looked like miniature worlds. In one tank, tiny trees swayed in an artificial breeze. In another, small creatures moved through clear water. A third contained what looked like a miniature city, complete with tiny buildings and moving vehicles. But it was the center of the room that truly amazed him. A large sphere, 10 meters across, hung suspended in the air. Inside, Vex could see clouds, oceans, and continents. It was a planet, a living, breathing world, complete and perfect, contained in a bubble of energy. Beautiful, isn't it? Vex spun. Around, his weapon raised. A human stood in the doorway, middle-aged, wearing a simple lab coat with kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. Dr. Marcus Webb. "You're here to kill me," Webb said calmly. "I know. The Council sent you because they're afraid of what I've created." "You violated the technology accords," Vex said, his weapon trained on the human. "You've created forbidden technology." Webb nodded. "Yes, I have. I've created life itself. Not just copies of existing life, but entirely new forms. New worlds. New possibilities." He gestured to the tanks around them. "Each of these contains a complete ecosystem. Billions of years of evolution, compressed into months of careful design. I've created worlds where life can flourish in ways never before imagined." Vex's finger tightened on the trigger. "The Council maintains order. Without control, chaos follows. You know this." "Do I?" Webb walked closer, unafraid of the weapon pointed at him. "Look around you, Captain. Do you see chaos? Or do you see creation? Wonder? Hope?" Despite himself, Vex looked. In the tanks, he saw incredible beauty. Creatures that danced through the air, plants that sang with musical tones, cities where different species lived in harmony. "The Council fears progress," Webb continued. They've kept the galaxy stagnant for millennia. But life wants to grow, to evolve, to become more than it was. Order must be maintained, Vex repeated, but his voice lacked conviction. Webb smiled sadly. You can kill me, Captain, but you can't kill what I've created. These worlds, these new forms of life, they'll continue to grow and evolve long after I'm gone. The question is, will you be part of creation or destruction? Vex stared at the miniature world spinning slowly in its energy field. Inside, he could see cities of light, forests of crystal, oceans that shimmered with colors he'd never seen before. For the first time in his military career, Captain Vex hesitated. The human had been sent to kill stood before him, defenseless, waiting for his decision. Around them, new worlds pulsed with life and possibility. What happened next would change everything. The moment of choice, Captain Vex's hand trembled as he held the plasma rifle. The weapon that had ended dozens of lives across the galaxy now felt impossibly heavy. Dr. Webb stood before him, calm and unafraid, as if he were discussing the weather rather than his own death. You're hesitating, Webb observed gently. Good. That means you're thinking. The Council doesn't want soldiers who think. They want weapons that obey. Silence. Vex snapped, but his voice cracked. He'd been trained since childhood to follow orders without question. Doubt was weakness. Hesitation meant failure, but he couldn't stop staring at the miniature world spinning in its energy field. Tell me about it, he heard himself say. Webb's eyes lit up. Which one? They're all different. That one there, he pointed to a tank, containing what looked like a forest of glass trees. Those are the singing groves of Ethel. The trees are actually living crystal. They grow by absorbing radiation and convert it into music. The sound they make can heal both physical and emotional wounds. Despite himself, Vex lowered his weapon slightly. That's impossible. Crystal can't live. That's what everyone said about dozens of things we now take for granted, Webb replied. The Council's scientists said space travel was impossible until we figured it out. They said faster-than-light communication couldn't work until we invented quantum entanglement communicators. Webb moved to another tank, this one filled with what looked like swimming lights. These are the void dancers. They exist in the space between dimensions. They feed on dark energy and can travel instantly across any distance. But more than that, they're artists. They create sculptures out of folded space-time itself. Vex found himself walking closer. Inside the tank, the lights moved in patterns that seemed almost like a dance. They're beautiful. Beauty is just the beginning, Webb said. Each of these worlds represents a different answer to the question. What if life could be more than it is? What if we weren't limited by the biology we inherited or the physics we thought we understood? He gestured to the large sphere in the center. That's Haven, a complete world where dozens of species I've created live together. They've developed their own cultures, their own languages, their own art. In just 6 months, they've created poetry that would make the galaxy's greatest. Writers weep. Vex stared at the tiny world. But they're not real. They're artificial, created. So are you, Webb said quietly. The Council's genetic modification programs have been altering their soldiers for centuries. Your strength, your speed, your ability to see in different spectrums, none of that is natural. You're as artificial as anything in this room. The words hit Vex like a physical blow. He'd always known about the modifications, but hearing it stated so plainly made something inside him twist. The difference, Webb continued, is that I created these beings to be free, to grow, to choose their own paths. The Council created you to be a weapon, to obey, to never question. Vex's communication device crackled to life. Strike leader. Vex, report status. He looked at the device, then at Webb, and at the world surrounding them. Target located. Engaging. Acknowledged. Orbital bombardment will commence in 30 minutes to destroy all evidence. Ensure you're clear of the facility. The connection ended. Webb had heard every word. They're going to destroy everything, Webb said, but he didn't sound surprised. All of these worlds. All of these new forms of life. They'd rather see it all burn than risk losing control. Vex felt something he'd never experienced before, a cold rage that had nothing to do with combat training. You knew this would happen. I hoped it wouldn't. But yes, I knew it was likely. Webb walked to the center of the room, placing his hand on the energy field surrounding Haven. The Council has destroyed entire civilizations for less. Then why? Vex demanded. Why create all this if you knew it would be destroyed? Webb turned to him with a smile that was both sad and proud. Because someone had to try? Because the galaxy is dying, Captain. Not from war or disease, but from stagnation. The Council has kept us all in cages for so long that we've forgotten what it means to truly live. He gestured to the miniature worlds around them. These beings will experience more joy, more wonder, more growth in their short lives than most. Species do in millennia. Even if they only exist for a few more minutes, they will have truly lived. Vex looked at his weapon and at the worlds around him. 30 minutes until orbital bombardment. 30 minutes to decide who he really was. A weapon of the Council, or something more. The awakening asterisk Captain Vex stood in the chamber surrounded by impossible worlds, his mind reeling from revelations that shattered everything he'd believed about. His purpose. The plasma rifle in his hands felt alien now, a tool of destruction in a place dedicated to creation. 28 minutes, he said aloud, checking his CHRONETER. Dr. Webb nodded, his attention focused on a control panel. Enough time to save some of them if we work together. Save them how? Vex asked, though he was surprised to find himself asking at all. The worlds are contained in portable energy matrices. We can transfer them to my ship. It's hidden in the canyon, with enough fuel to reach the outer rim. Webb's fingers flew over the controls. But I can't move them all alone. The energy requirements are massive. Vex watched as Webb began the process of powering down the first tank. Inside, the singing groves of Ethel seemed to sense the change, their crystal trees pulsing with concerned harmonies. The Council will hunt you forever, Vex said. They'll never stop, and I'll keep running. These worlds, these new forms of life, they deserve a chance to grow, to become whatever they're meant to become. Webb paused in his work. Help me, Captain. Help me save them. Vex stared at the miniature world of Haven. Inside, he could see tiny figures moving through crystal cities, living their lives unaware that extinction approached from the stars above. I'm programmed to follow orders, he said quietly. No, Webb replied, lifting the first portable matrix. You're programmed to make choices. The Council just never wanted you to realize it. Something clicked in Vex's mind. All his life, he'd been told he was a perfect soldier. Unquestioning, obedient. But now he remembered moments, small ones, when he'd felt doubt. When he'd wondered if the orders he followed were right. The Council had suppressed those moments, explained them away as glitches in his conditioning. But they weren't glitches. They were thoughts. His thoughts. 17 minutes, he said, then moved to help Webb with the second matrix. Working together, they began the careful process of transferring the worlds. Each matrix was delicate, requiring precise handling to maintain the energy fields that sustained entire civilizations. Why did you create them? Vex asked as they worked. Webb smiled as he carefully lifted the Void Dancer's matrix. My daughter asked me that once. She said, Dad, Why do you make new things when there are already so many things in the universe? He paused, looking into the swirling lights. I told her that making something new isn't about adding to what already exists. It's about discovering what's possible. Every new form of life, every new world, shows us that the universe is bigger and more wonderful than we imagined. Where is she now? Your daughter? Webb's expression darkened. Dead. The council classified her as a security risk when she began showing interest in my work. They said it was an accident, but ... He didn't finish the sentence. He didn't need to. Vex felt that cold rage again, stronger now. How many? How many what? How many people has the council killed to maintain their order? Webb looked at him with sad eyes. Do you really want to know? Yes. Billions. Entire species that developed too quickly. Civilizations that asked too many questions. Scientists who made discoveries that threatened the status quo. Webb lifted another matrix. They've been doing it for 3,000 years. They call it maintaining stability. 8 minutes, Vex said, but his hands kept working. They were down to the final matrices now. Haven was last, its energy requirements. The most complex. As Webb began the transfer process, alarms began blaring throughout the facility. They're early, Webb said grimly. The bombardment ships are powering up. Through the facility's windows, Vex could see lights appearing in the sky. The Council's destroyers, their weapons charging with enough power to turn the entire research station into plasma. Go, Webb said, not looking up from his work. Take the matrices to the ship. I'll finish with Haven. I won't leave you. Webb looked up surprised. Captain? My name is Vex, and I'm done being their weapon. They worked frantically as the lights in the sky grew brighter. The energy matrix containing Haven was massive, requiring both of them to lift it. Through its transparent walls, Vex could see the tiny inhabitants of the miniature world looking up at their sky, perhaps sensing the change in their universe. 3 minutes, Vex said, as they carried Haven toward the exit. The ship is half a kilometer through the canyon, Webb said. Can you make it? Vex looked at the world in his arms, a complete civilization, trusting him with their existence. I have to. As they reached the facility's exit, the sky erupted with light. The bombardment had begun. Part 4. The Escape. 770 words. The first bombardment. Beams struck the research facility as Vex and Dr. Webb ran across the rocky terrain. The blast turned the building's east wing into molten slag, sending shockwaves that knocked both men to their knees. Don't drop it. Webb shouted over the roar of destruction. Vex clutched the energy matrix containing Haven against his chest. Through its transparent walls, he could see the tiny world's inhabitants taking shelter as their artificial sky flickered with the vibrations of the attack. Move! Vex bellowed, hauling Webb to his feet. They ran through the canyon as the bombardment intensified. Plasma beams rained from the sky like deadly lightning, each one powerful enough to vaporize a city block. The council ships were being thorough. Nothing would remain of the research facility or its contents. There! Webb pointed ahead to what looked like a pile of rocks. But as they got closer, Vex could see it was camouflaged, a ship, sleek and small, designed for stealth and speed. Another blast hit the canyon wall above them, sending boulders crashing down. Vex's enhanced reflexes saved them both, pushing Webb aside as a chunk of rock the size of a ground car smashed into the spot where they'd been standing. The ship's entrance! Webb gasped, blood streaming from a cut on his forehead. They reached the hidden vessel just as the research facility's main reactor exploded. The blast waves swept through the canyon like a hurricane, lifting both men off their feet and slamming them against the ship's hull. Vex felt his armor crack from the impact, but he kept his grip on Haven. Inside the matrix, the tiny world had Gone dark emergency protocols, protecting its inhabitants from the chaos outside. Webb fumbled with the ship's controls, his hands shaking from shock and injury. "Come on," he muttered. "Come on." The hatch opened with a soft hiss. They tumbled inside as another bombardment beam struck the canyon floor where they'd been standing. "Strap in," Webb shouted, racing to the pilot's seat. "This is going to be rough." The ship's interior was cramped but efficient. Vex found himself in a cargo hold filled with other energy matrices, the worlds they'd managed to save. Each one pulsed with its own unique energy signature, containing entire civilizations that existed nowhere else in the universe. "How many?" he asked as the ship's engines roared to life. 17 worlds, Webb replied, "out of 43 I'd created." The ship lifted off, just as the Council destroyers began their final bombardment pattern. The entire valley filled with superheated plasma, turning rock into glass and glass into vapor. "Hyperspace in 10 seconds, Webb announced. "Assuming we can reach minimum safe distance." Through the ship's rear viewport, Vex watched the place where the research facility had stood disappear under a barrage of energy weapons. Everything was gone. The laboratory, the remaining worlds, 26 civilizations erased in minutes. "They're trying to lock onto us," Webb said, his voice tight with concentration. "The Council ships are fast, but they're big. We might be able to." The ship shuddered as something impacted their hull. Not a direct hit, but close enough to send sparks flying from the control panels. "Hyperdrive is damaged," Webb reported. "We're not going to make it to hyperspace." Vex unbuckled himself and moved to the co-pilot's seat. "What about the emergency beacon?" "What emergency beacon?" Asterisk, Council ships are required to carry emergency beacons. If they think we're destroyed, they'll stop looking. Vex's hands moved over the ship's controls. His military training had included piloting, though he'd never thought he'd use it to escape the Council rather than serve it. "That single quotes S... actually brilliant," Webb said. "But we need to fake our destruction convincingly. Leave that to me." Vex activated the ship's emergency systems. "I know how Council sensors work. We make them think we've been hit, drop some debris, then drift on minimal power until they leave." The ship shuddered again, this time from a near miss that sent them spinning. Vex fought with the controls, using the spin to send them tumbling toward a cluster of asteroids. "Now," he shouted. Webb projected a cloud of metallic debris pieces of the ship's outer hull that had been damaged in the escape. To Council sensors, it would look like a catastrophic hull breach. Vex shut down all non-essential systems, including the engines. They went dark, drifting like a dead ship among the asteroids. "Emergency beacon activated," Webb whispered. "Automated distress signal broadcasting on all frequencies. Ship destroyed, no survivors." Asterisk through the viewport, they watched the Council. Destroyers moved closer to investigate. Massive ships, each one capable of destroying a planet, searching for any sign of life. Vex held his breath as the lead destroyer's searchlight swept over their position. The light passed over them, moved on, then came back. "They're scanning us," Webb whispered. "Minimal power," Vex replied. "Barely enough to keep life support running. To them, we're just another piece of debris." Asterisk, the searchlight moved on. After what felt like hours, but was probably only minutes, the Council ships began to withdraw. "They're leaving," Webb said, hardly daring to believe it. Vex waited until the destroyers had jumped to hyperspace before reactivating their systems. "Now we run. As far and as fast as we can." But as the ship's engines came back online, a new problem emerged. The hyperdrive wasn't just damaged, it was completely destroyed. They were stranded in a hostile galaxy, carrying 17 worlds and nowhere to go. The new beginning 3 days later, Vex stood in the ship's small observation deck, watching. The stars drift past. They were running on emergency power, their food supplies dwindling, and the hyperdrive remained beyond repair. But somehow, he felt more alive than he had in years. The Void Dancers are trying to communicate. Dr. Webb called from the main cabin. Vex found Webb crouched beside one of the energy matrices, his scanner showing complex patterns of light moving within the containment field. The beings inside creatures, of pure energy that existed between dimensions, were pulsing in rhythmic sequences. They know we're in trouble, Webb said with wonder. They're offering to help. How can they help? They're trapped in a matrix barely larger than a closet. Webb's eyes lit up with the same excitement Vex had seen when he'd first entered the research facility. That's just it, they're not trapped. The matrix isn't a prison, it's an anchor point. They exist in higher dimensions. They could probably fold space itself if we let them. You're talking about releasing them? Not releasing partnering. The Void Dancers are explorers by nature. They want to see the universe as much as we want to survive. Vex looked at the pulsing lights in the matrix. 3 days ago, he would have called this insane. Now, it seemed like their only hope. What do you need me to do? Working together, they modified the matrix controls to allow limited interaction. The Void Dancers responded immediately, their lights forming complex patterns that Webb translated through his scanners. They say they can create a stable wormhole, Webb said, his voice filled with excitement. But not to anywhere we might expect. They're offering to take us to a place between dimensions, a pocket of space where the Council can't follow. And the other worlds? The civilizations you created? They'll be safe there. More than safe, they'll be able to grow without interference. The Void Dancers are offering to help us create a haven for all the species the Council has tried to suppress. Vex felt a strange sensation hope. It was unfamiliar, but not unpleasant. Do it. The process was unlike anything Vex had ever experienced. The Void Dancers emerged from their matrix as beings of pure light, their forms shifting and flowing, like liquid starlight. They surrounded the ship, their presence causing reality itself to bend and fold. Space outside the viewports began to change. Stars stretched into lines of light, then spiraled into impossible geometries. Vex felt the ship moving, but not through normal space. They were traveling through dimensions that didn't have names. When the journey ended, they found themselves in a place that defied description. It was neither space nor planet, but somehow both. A vast realm where multiple realities intersected, where different physical laws applied in different regions. It's perfect, Webb whispered Dot. They spent the following weeks establishing what they came to call the sanctuary. The Void Dancers helped them create stable zones where each of the 17 worlds could exist and grow. The Singing Groves of Ethel found a region where their crystal trees could grow to massive sizes, their music echoing across dimensional boundaries. Other species discovered areas where their unique needs were met perfectly, but the greatest success was Haven, the complete world Webb had created. In the sanctuary's unique environment, it began to expand, its artificial boundaries dissolving as its inhabitants spread out to explore their new, limitless realm. They're not just surviving, Webb told Vex one day as they watched the former. Miniature worlds spread across a vast dimensional plane. They're thriving. They're becoming more than I ever imagined they could be. Vex nodded, but his attention was elsewhere. His enhanced senses had detected something approaching through the dimensional barrier's other ships. Small craft traveling carefully, as if afraid of being followed. We have visitors, he announced. The ships that emerged from the dimensional folds were unlike anything in the Council's fleet. They were obviously alien, but designed with an aesthetic that prioritized beauty over intimidation. Their hulls were curved and organic, decorated with patterns that seemed to shift in the light. They're refugees, Webb realized as the ships broadcast their identification, species that fled Council control. They've heard about the sanctuary. Over the following months, more ships arrived. Scientists whose research had been banned. Artists whose work had been deemed too dangerous. Entire populations of species that had been marked for elimination. The sanctuary grew, not through conquest or control, but through cooperation. Each new species brought their own knowledge, their own perspective, their own unique contributions to the growing community. Vex found himself in an unexpected role, not as a weapon, but as a protector. His council training made him invaluable in organizing defenses and helping new arrivals adapt to their freedom. "You know," Webb said one evening as they watched the lights of a dozen different civilizations sparkle across the dimensional landscape, "the council sent you to kill me." Vex smiled an expression that had been rare in his old life, but came easily now. "They did. Instead, I helped you create something that will outlast them all." In the distance, the void dancers painted new constellations across the sky, while the songs of the crystal groves provided a soundtrack for the birth of a new kind of civilization, one built on creation rather than control. The assassin had become a guardian. The weapon had chosen to create rather than destroy. And somewhere in the vast galaxy beyond, the Council continued their rigid rule, never knowing that their perfect soldier had found something better than orders to follow. He had found a cause worth fighting for. Asterisk.